Behold, my glorious supporter Dubba Stubba has asked me to discuss what Warframe would play like if it was a collectible card game. Now I know what you're thinking, the same thing that I thought. Warframe already is a collectible card game, what are you talking about? But even more than I already only play the game as a collectible card game on the mod screen. What if that was really what it was? I actually think this is surprisingly easy to imagine. Like, I can think of a lot of games that are sort of similar that we can use for a reference, and then I don't think I've done less prep for a parlay in like ever in my like in all of the ones I've done. As soon as you ask this, in my head, I could easily picture like this is exactly what it would be. So I'm going to try to describe that to you now. So I'm thinking as a base of games like Slay the Spire or what's that other one called? Monster Train, I think. There's a game like that. Anyway, these are games that they're turn-based combat, and you have a deck, and your deck is kind of like your abilities or attacks, and these are going to be our weapon mods. So basically, we're going to take the weapon mods on a Warframe weapon, and you build your loadout. We're not going to change that. You build your loadout, so you mod your Warframe, you mod your primary, your secondary, your melee, stuff like that, right? And that all works exactly the same, and that's the deck building screen. So then all those cards get taken off and they get put into your, whatever we're gonna call your library, Magic the Gathering player, and you'll, draw them and do the thing, right? And then there's, of course, a couple of different ways you could go. So the first way would be that playing a mod like powers up that weapon, and then so on your turn you're going to choose to attack with a weapon or use a Warframe power. And once you choose what you want to do, you can then play mod cards. The what's it called? The drain, the capacity cost that the mods have will be like how much they cost to play, I guess. That would make that a much more meaningful mechanic than it is in actual Warframe. Most of the time, it's just like the capacity cost of a mod doesn't matter in so long as you have enough time to forma it and enough forma. Whereas in this case, it actually would matter. There would be some cases where a mod being cheaper, like you just want that. It would also be horribly unbalanced because a lot of cheap mods are better than more expensive mods. But anyway, C note at like elementals, for example. Anyway, so let's say I've got my loadout, and let's just do a starter loadout. So I've got my Excalibur, I've got my Bratton, I've got my Kunai, and I've got my Skana, my basic kit. Let's do bow. Probably my recommended starter loadout if you want to be boring. Excalibur, Bratton, Kunai, bow. Mark 1s, of course. And then we've got mods in them, right? So let's say for this fight, we start, it's my turn, I draw my cards from my mod deck or whatever, my library, and I get some amount of capacity. Not sure how that will work. We'll get back to that later. Energy mechanic and such. And then I want to attack with my bow, so I'm going to use my staff. So I'll play my pressure point mod onto my bow staff, and then that increases its damage for, some amount of time. And the mechanic of this game is that it'll be a snowballing game. So it's still kind of a looter shooter. We want to save that part. But it's going to be a snowballing game. So when you play a mod, it's like you're installing it into your weapon, and then you go from there. So we install pressure point, and then we can do a swing with the weapon. And now the bow has good range, so we'll hit multiple enemies or something. Let's just say we hit 2 enemies, and we kill them. Now it's a horde shooter, so it has to be a horde turn-based card game, right? And those enemies will die, and then they're going to drop loot. They're going to drop things like ammo, energy. I think that it's still good to have energy so you can charge your Warframe powers, and then you can use those later. Those become more impactful compared to weapons if you have to charge them up, and then they can be OP. And then Endo. My idea for a sort of progression mechanic here is that in the middle of combat, you get Endo and you can rank up your mods. So like instead of ranking them up on the mod screen, you could maybe rank them up in combat, or you just use the Endo outside of combat or whatever. But having there be some way to power up your weapons in combat and then you sort of snowball and get everything going would be kind of fun. It's a little bit different than the way Warframe currently works, but it's not that different. You could still have things like the combo counter for your melee weapon. There are a lot of balancing problems here. So for example, off the top of my head, I'm thinking with the economy I just gave you, it sounds like melee weapons, they don't need ammo, and they get more powerful as you attack with them more if they have the combo counter and you can do mechanics like that. Although I guess you don't get the power until you like draw your Blood Rush mod or something. That's kind of interesting. Anyway, yeah, so maybe that's fine. You could make builds that were based around, the guns or maybe more upfront damage, or you could have sort of a 1-2 punch thing and you're playing kind of more with status effects too. Whereas your melee weapon is more of a combo build type of thing. So if you invest in your melee weapon, you're aiming to build up combo or like use a big heavy attack, do a big heavy attack, or you're building up combo hoping that you will draw into your Blood Rush. I think that the biggest challenge is to find a way to translate mechanics into card selection and things like that. Again, I'm thinking of it from the perspective of Magic, and it's like, what mechanics can we translate over? Oh, I have an idea. Okay, so to get through your deck more, I was thinking, let's say you want to make a melee build, and so that's kind of a combo build. You're banking on using combo to do a huge heavy attack and or like get your combo counter mod so that it pays off. So you're going to melee a bunch. Maybe it's weaker at first, I don't know. And then, because you can only attack enemies in front of you, right? So you can't choose to attack enemies in the back because you don't have a ranged weapon. Now I'm thinking of Paper Mario. And so you build up combo, and you're hoping that you'll draw into your Blood Rush or your Sacrificial Steel or whatever payoff for having a lot of combo, preferably Blood Rush and then Sacrificial Steel, so you can use the big combo to do lots of crits, and then when you get to your boss enemy or whatever, because of course the enemies have to get harder as they come, because you're going to get stronger as you install more mods, then you get your big Sacrificial Steel, and you can wha-bam and just one-shot the boss. Sick combo build. So you have to have a way to like dig for your combo. If you can't build around it, that's not going to be fun. So here's how you can build around it. Reload speed and attack speed and stuff are like drawing more cards or looking ahead in your deck, your library or whatever. And so you can use that, mechanics like that, to build up combo faster. That even fits flavorfully with the game. This would be so cool. You could make this a mobile game. It would be sick. I'm going to make this and get sued a million times. Also, Digital Extremes sponsored this project. It would be sweet. Like, it makes itself. Like, it's just free money sitting on the ground. I don't even have that much else to say. Like, I think it's so comparatively simple. It's like once you start thinking about it, it's like, oh, there's plenty of little things you can use. Warframe is the perfect kind of game for this because there's so many gameplay elements. Whenever you have a design problem, you're basically guaranteed to have a thematic gameplay element that you can use to fill that design problem. And so the game is going to feel amazing if you've played Warframe before, because everything will kind of make sense, and you'll just have those things in your head. It's always nice to do things like this because although they can seem fan servicey, they have a strong benefit where you kind of don't need to learn terminology. There's a way in which it sort of makes sense that reloading is like getting more, like drawing more cards, basically, right? Maybe there could be more complicated things like the loot ends up in your deck or something. There's this mechanic in Slay the Spire where enemies will have attacks that are intended to slow you down. The way that works is that a slime boss, for example, will slime you and put some cards in your deck that don't do anything. They're just in the way, and you kind of just have to get rid of them. And so a lot of the cards in your deck, or it depends on your build, but a lot of the cards in your deck might end up being things that you don't own as like mod cards or cards in your deck. Again, this isn't Slay the Spire, but you can still play and interact with somehow. For example, there'll be things in Slay the Spire that are like, you cast this and then you get 2 of another card that you can then play. Like maybe it's like a triple blade attack, and so you use the one and then you get 2 more that are free to cast, and you can do like 2-3 for your 3 hits. And then if something says like every time you do an attack something happens, then it combos with that. And you could totally do that with Warframe too. It's amazing how like 1-to-1 the comparison from something like Slay the Spire and then Warframe is. It would be cool. You could go in a different direction too. It definitely doesn't have to be something like you just mod your guns in the middle of combat. You could have them modded and then have the cards you draw be actions you can perform, like bullet jumping, and then if you put on a bullet jump mod, you get that card. There could be some mods that give you a card in your deck and some mods that power up cards in your deck. That might fit better with Warframe. So for example, it could be that base damage mods are how you actually attack, and when you put in something like an elemental, that just powers it up, but a status effect is then like a new you get to attack and you have that percentage chance to also inflict viral or whatever a million times. You could do things like, again, on your Warframe, a bullet jump mod does put a card in your deck that lets you bullet jump, which could be like you get evasion or something. And then like Vitality or Redirection or Steel Fiber is like a way to defend yourself. But then there could be other cards, like if you have, say, Intensify, then your 4 Warframe power cards in your deck just are stronger, like, which is what happens in normal Warframe, rather than it putting a mod in your deck that is just Intensify, because that might be less interesting. So that way only things that actually do something are put in. I don't know. You could do it either way. Preventing the snowballing thing might be kind of good. That does have a bit of a, like, it's got the negative feedback thing where if the game is too easy, then you keep snowballing and it gets easier. And if the game is too hard, then you keep falling behind and it gets harder. Something I experienced with Fire Emblem Three Houses, where, so that game is permadeath, but you need to invest a lot of time in your students. So if you've been giving a student a lot of attention and then they die, then you lost all that time you invested and one of your strongest students. So you're less likely to have another student to step in and be able to help and back you up, because you lost the resource that's powerful and you lost what you invested in that resource. Whereas it can be less punishing when you have a system where you lose a resource, but maybe you gain some freedom of whatever. You don't need to maintain that resource or what have you. You don't need to protect it. When you have 3 weapons in Warframe, the ammo economy isn't stringent enough for this to be a problem, but it's kind of like you have to maintain 3 weapons, sort of. And so if you were to be disarmed or something, you could imagine that maybe it's not so bad because you lost one way to attack, but you also don't have to keep that weapon going or something. Again, in Warframe, the ammo economy and such are not stringent enough for that to matter, but they could be, and that's not quite the same kind of like devastating feedback loop. So anyway, I think it would be really cool. I would love to see something like this. Normally, I really don't like these kind of spin-off-y games. I feel very strongly that a game doesn't have to do everything. A game is not meant to be everything in your life. It's meant to be that you play this game for what it's worth, and then you go enjoy other things, like for different reasons, You're not supposed to do just this one thing all the time. That's how people get really burned out and stop enjoying games and lose their perspective on games and think there's something wrong with the game just because they're feeling burnt out. No, you just need to stop playing. But this is a thing where I feel like it could really supplement the game, and it'd be interesting because it could sort of teach you mods. You'd get exposed to mods in a different way. I don't know, it could be cool. I also really like the idea of, so in Slay the Spire, in a lot of these games I've been giving as examples, you don't have a huge number of enemies. Generally, the enemies are quality over quantity. There are small fry enemies, but not a lot. And even then, like a lot of the time, they're not total pushovers. They're not a sort of a horde style game where almost all of your enemies are trivial threats, but there are a very large number of them. It could be really cool to play a game in that format, but that has like a huge number of enemies. That could be quite interesting. And mechanics like punch through could be really cool. You could do things like attacks area of effect could be really interesting. There's lots of stuff. Like a lot of it fits really well into that genre. Digital Extremes, like we have a contender. Like we got to make this game. I'm excited. I'm gonna go contact some associates if you know what I'm saying. Dubba Stubba, thank you for the intriguing and truly exciting question that has provoked my imagination.